We're now live on Facebook as well. So hi everybody, I'm just going to straighten you guys out a little bit. Okay, that makes me feel a little better. All right, well hey everybody, and welcome to Facebook Live for Celebrate Recovery. My name is Johnny. I'm a believer. I struggle with alcoholism and codependency, and with me tonight...
Hi, my name is Jeni, and I'm a believer who struggles with codependency and adult child family dysfunction.
And we're really glad for you to be here with us tonight, whether you're watching on Facebook or Instagram. Hi, Instagram. Good to see you guys there as well. And we've got a few people joining us now on our Facebook page, too. So that's cool. So very excited to be here with you tonight. We haven't been here in a while.
Yeah, it's been a couple weeks.
So it's nice to be back. And so as you come on, make sure you say hello and where you're from. And let us know if you have any questions. We'll try to answer them as they come up. It'll be hard for us to kind of see the ones on Instagram, but we'll do our best if we can see those kind of far away. Before we get started with what we're going to talk about tonight, we do want to talk about the Celebrate Recovery Summit, July 30th and 31st, and it's going to be online everywhere, so you can watch it on Celebrate Recovery. If you go to crsummits.com, you can find out all the information. And we'd love for you to be able to watch it live with us on July 30th and 31st, but there's something also really cool. About a week later, you can watch.
I'm a little tired. Plus, somebody just opened our front door, and I was trying to figure out what was going on. We've extended it now. So it was that we were going to let it run for 48 hours after the air date, but we've extended it for a whole week. And so what's really great about that is I noticed there's some questions last night. Somebody had said they needed to know whether or not they needed to take off work to be able to watch it, and they were looking for like a schedule so they could figure out, is this meant to be sit down and watch all the way through one sitting, or can you break it up? And so what's great about that week, extending it for that week, is that it allows more freedom. If you're like, I've got time to watch one talk right now, you can watch it and pause it and then come back to it. I know that that if you have kids at home, that's beneficial, or time zones, that's really beneficial, or if you work, then you don't have to miss work to be able to attend or to see the summit. So I think there's lots of ways that this really helps.
Yeah, and some of you may just want to rewatch my talk over and over and over again, and you have a week to do that. Just kidding.
But that's true. You do have to, if you want to watch it through, and then you're like, oh, what did they say again? Or maybe you wanted to go back and take some notes or something. There is that freedom that you can rewatch it too.
Yeah, we've got some really cool talks for the summit this year as well, and we've got. I'm really excited about your conversation with Cheryl Luke that we're showing at the summit.
I'm very excited about that, yes.
You and I are talking about what is Celebrate Recovery.
And I'm really excited about that too, because again, I hope that there is going to be some people who are new to recovery who are able to come to the summit for the first time. I did see a while ago there was a lady who said that her two daughters who are not in recovery are going to attend it with her this year, or that are new to recovery, and so I'm really excited about that talk. Yeah,
one of the cool things about this summit is it's only $49 a person. If you sign up 5, you get a 6th person free. Now that I believe is ending on July 17th, so there's a couple of weeks left to do that. So I would encourage you, if you're going to sign up a group of people, to take advantage of that and get a 6th person free for every 5th person you sign up. But one of the cool things about it being so much less expensive this year is that you can invite people to come with you. And to me, that's really exciting. I know in the past, to come to one of the summits, either in California or in Tennessee, it was travel expenses and expensive to stay and tickets and food and all that kind of stuff. And this year, $49 a person, it's so much easier to come. So really would encourage you to invite some people that maybe you've been trying to kind of expose to Celebrate Recovery, and tell them a little bit about Celebrate Recovery. And this is just such a great way to do that. Somebody, by the way, a few seconds ago commented that she is celebrating 11 years clean and sober today.
Oh, congratulations.
So that's really awesome. So congrats on that. I'm so glad that you're joining us tonight, and thank you for sharing that with us as well. And so, lots of great talks. We're going to hear from John and Cheryl Baker. We're going to hear from Mac and Mary Owen. We're going to hear from John Townsend. Pastor Rick and Kay Warren are going to be there. The Holmstroms are going to be there. We're going to have Hosanna Poetry. We're going to have the Skit Guys. It's going to be a great time. We're going to worship together. So I really encourage you to check that out. And we just can't wait for that July 30th and 31st. Like we said, there's a whole week that you can watch it afterwards. To kind of soak it in or digest some of those talks a little bit more. Like you said, maybe there's things that interrupt you
Yeah, there can be scheduling conflicts,
yeah.
and that kind of helps alleviate some of the scheduling conflicts.
Yeah. So, tonight what we really want to talk about with our time is this idea, this thing that I've been kind of struck with over and over again this last week, is that it's really up to you and I to share our story. Mm-hmm. It's really up to us to share our testimony. And I don't mean that only in the formal way of standing in front of your Celebrate Recovery group, writing your official testimony and reading it out loud, but sharing the testimony of what God has done and is doing for us in Celebrate Recovery. And we often talk about how much stories and how much testimonies are so important. I love testimonies. I love hearing people's testimonies on Friday nights when we're able to meet in person. I can't wait to get back together to meet in person. And if you're unfamiliar with Celebrate Recovery, the way we alternate our large group time is we have a lesson, and the next week we have a testimony. And so testimonies are an integral part of Celebrate Recovery. In my quiet time this week, I read this verse from Judges, and it really kind of struck me. So by the time we get to the book of Judges, the Israelites have come out of Israel, or out of Egypt, that is. They've crossed the Red Sea. They've wandered for 40 years in the wilderness. Moses has died. Joshua is brought up as a leader, and Joshua leads the people into the promised land. And when he gets there, or when they get there, they begin taking over, and they do exactly what God said they were going to do. He gives all the people in the land to the people of Israel. And then we get this really interesting verse. It's in Joshua 2, verse 10. It says, after the whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. And I find that so interesting because it's only one generation. So here's this group of people who followed Moses, they followed Joshua, and then Joshua dies. All of those people around him and the people who walked through those things die, and the very next generation know nothing of the Lord or what he's done for Israel. And it reminded me how important it is to share our story and tell people what's going on in our lives. And so what I really want to talk about is different ways that you can share your testimony. And you've shared your testimony both at Celebrate Recovery, and you've shared it at different places. What has that experience been like for you as somebody who shared their testimony, going from somebody who was maybe a little like anxious about sharing it the first time? I was trying not to say terrified, but a little nervous about sharing it the first time, now kind of used to sharing it that way.
I love getting to share my testimony. I love it. It's fun. It didn't start out that way though. I mean, I remember the first time I gave my testimony was at the I want to say it was the second East Coast Summit in Florida. Was that the second one?
Yeah.
And I was terrified, but I got through it, and it's gotten a little bit easier every time. And then I hit a point where I love it. And I actually got to do a joint testimony with my sister one time.
Yeah, that was very cool.
For a MOPS group, and that was kind of cool. But I love it. I find it a privilege to be able to get up and share my testimony. And then there's nothing. It's so cool to hear somebody come up to you afterwards, and because I've had this experience with somebody else's testimony, or when someone else speaks and say, hey, your testimony really spoke to me. There's something about that when you hear somebody say, hey, God used you to talk to me, or what you said about your life, that was my life, or I can really relate to this experience that you had. There's nothing quite like that.
Yeah.
It is so cool, and it makes you go, okay, yeah, God's amazing. Look what he's doing, you know?
And right now, there's been a few people making comments about how they're sharing their testimony this week, or they're sharing it up in an upcoming Celebrate Recovery.
Cool.
And so as Celebrate Recoveries begin to reopen across the world, really, that's going to be more possible. But for some of us, especially like for us here in California, we're not allowed to have our large group gathering yet.
Not yet.
And so does that mean that we can't share our testimonies?
No, that's the great thing. So I think when you think of sharing your testimony, you think of it in that traditional sense, right? You're up in front of people, a group of people, sharing your story. And the neat thing about it is that it doesn't have to be to a group of people in order to share your story. Somebody, well, I was just thinking about this actually, I didn't even tell you this, but one of the last Facebook Live, I didn't do Facebook Live with Johnny but maybe twice before the quarantine, because I was terrified.
Always
against my will,
yeah.
And I'll just sit there. But somebody asked a question. I think the question was along the lines of, how do you invite a friend to come to Celebrate Recovery? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And I think sharing your story is one of the greatest ways to invite a friend to Celebrate Recovery, especially right now, because it can be really hard to walk up to somebody, a friend, and say, hey, I think you could use some recovery in your life.
Yeah, right?
I mean, some people might be just fine saying that to their friends. I don't think it would be well received. I know that when somebody comes to me, when he said to me that I had codependency issues in the very beginning, I pulled back from that. And okay. When he suggested to me that I might have codependency
Lately, she's been
issues.
saying that so much. Like when he told me I was a codependent, I never said she was a codependent.
Oh, you did. But anyway, lovingly, I'm sure it was very...
Instagram, no, I didn't.
Very lovingly. No, the point is that anytime somebody suggests that I need to work on something or I need to do something, I tend to do the opposite. I don't love to be told
words have never
what
been
to
shared.
do. I don't like it. And I rebel against it, much to my own detriment. I mean, that's a lot of what kept me, that and fear. That's a separate story. But I think it's much easier if you're sharing with a friend. They're sharing with you a hurt that they're having, and if you had a similar experience, you could say, oh yeah, or you're just talking about a hurt that you had in your life, you know. There's a lot of hurt going on right now.
Right.
You know, and if you can share some hope with how you've found healing or freedom from that particular area, they'll see it. You don't even have to say Celebrate Recovery. You can just say, this is how I got, or and I feel better now, or you know, I don't struggle with that like I did. And the natural question that will come up in the conversation, I think, is, well, how did you get there? How did you get to that point?
Right.
You know, just sharing your story and walking it through is an automatic in to say, hey, I found this at this program called Celebrate Recovery.
Right.
And if you ever want to come with me, I'd be happy to go with you, or anything like that. But I think sharing your story is one of the most natural ways, one-on-one with a friend, to be able to invite somebody to Celebrate Recovery.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, that many of us feel like we don't have that much of a story to tell. And so one thing I would encourage you is, no matter what you attend Celebrate Recovery for, is that God is doing something in your life. He's using you to you know, there's one of our favorite verses in 2 Corinthians says that God is the Father of all comfort, and He comforts us when we go through hard times, so that we can comfort others when they go through hard times as well. And to me, that's such a picture of Celebrate Recovery, right? We go through hard times. God comforts us. How? With other people in the context of group,
Yes.
and He does some amazing things in our lives.
Yes.
And then He uses us to serve other people.
Yes.
And so sharing your story is really powerful, even if you've only been in recovery for a few weeks or a few months. You don't have to be at the quote-unquote
Absolutely.
end of your journey or have a
Absolutely.
year of sobriety to share with other people about what God is doing in your life. You may have to have that much time to be able to share at your Celebrate Recovery, to get up on stage and share with your group, but you don't have to have that just to share with another person over a cup of coffee. And so there's a couple of ways that I want to encourage you to do that. The first one is what I call the elevator pitch testimony, and that is, you're in the elevator, the doors close, you're going to go up the elevator, and somebody says to you, hey, what's that Celebrate Recovery shirt that you have on? What is that? Now, to me, that's already sharing testimony a little bit by wearing some of the shirts. And by the way, that's why we have these shirts. It isn't a money-making thing. It isn't a promotion thing. It's a way to begin to have that conversation with other people. We try to have something that will say, hey, what is that? What does that mean? And so when somebody does, I would really encourage you to be prepared to give an answer for that. You may not have a whole thing, right? You may not have a long story ready to go to pull out your phone and be like, here, I'm glad you asked, here's my testimony. But a couple sentences, and where you would just share a very quick version of what your testimony is. Celebrate Recovery is a ministry for people like me who are hurting with different issues in life, and this is how I found some healing, something very quickly. That the more you know somebody, the more time you're going to have to be able to share your testimony. And I would encourage you to begin to build that bridge with people and begin to start talking to people about what it is God is doing in your life through Celebrate Recovery. One of the guidelines in Celebrate Recovery is that anonymity and confidentiality are basic requirements. What is shared in the group stays in the group. There is an exception to that if you threaten to injure yourself or others, that's the only exception to that rule. Other than that, your anonymity is covered by attending Celebrate Recovery. What that means is if you come to Celebrate Recovery, we're not going to tell anybody that you were there. We're not going to report it. We're not going to say, oh, this person was here and all that kind of stuff. However, I would encourage you as a participant in Celebrate Recovery or a leader in Celebrate Recovery or somebody whose life has been changed and is being changed in Celebrate Recovery to begin to give up your own anonymity. Now, not the anonymity, I can't say that word too many more times because I'm going to start tripping up over it. Not the anonymity of other people. I will protect your anonymity if you come to our Celebrate Recovery. But I do not care about my anonymity. I love that people know I'm a part of Celebrate Recovery. I wear my shirts in public. I talk about Celebrate Recovery all the time. I do what Paul said, where Paul said we brag about our weaknesses because it's in our weaknesses that Christ's strength is made perfect. And so I like to be able to say, yeah, I go to this program and here's why I go and this is what I get out of it, all of those things. Because I like bragging on what God has done in my life because I know he can do it for other people. Now, your confidentiality, what you share in your group, that should stay no matter what. If you decide that you want to be out in front of people, you want to tell people you're in Celebrate Recovery or whatever, your confidentiality, what you share in the group, is so protected, and your anonymity is going to be protected as well. But I'm encouraging you as an individual to give up your anonymity, to allow people to know you're in Celebrate Recovery, to be able to say, hey, I'm in this program. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're in the grocery store and you see somebody else from Celebrate Recovery, you out them, right? You say, hey, why weren't you there on Friday night? I missed you at Celebrate Recovery. But if they say, it's just about being out in the open about what God has done in your life.
So people who aren't in recovery can hear about what recovery has done for you, the freedom and the hope that you have.
Yes. So other people can know what God is doing instead of keeping it to ourselves.
Yes, which is kind of that love your neighbor, right?
100%.
Part of loving your neighbor is sharing the hope and the healing and the freedom that you have found.
Yeah, and I think that there is a tendency in recovery to be ashamed.
Yes.
And to be ashamed of the things that we used to do or the things that were done to us. And as a result of that, we kind of go inward and we hold it into ourselves. But there is no shame of being in recovery. There's no shame about being in Celebrate Recovery. There's actual strength and courage it takes to be in Celebrate Recovery. And so you're boasting with people about what God has done in your life and kind of changing that conversation. So instead of people going, oh, I could never talk about that. Man, I talk about it all the time. Because God's so good, That
reminds me of somebody, I can't remember who told me this. So they said, Celebrate Recovery is the only place where you can stand up in front of a crowd of people and tell them all the things you've done wrong in your life and have them stand up and clap for you.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's even kind of weird, right? Like when you first start attending Celebrate Recovery and you share something really vulnerable and maybe not very pretty and we all clap and say thanks for sharing. There is that weird, like, aren't you going to judge me? We talked about this a couple weeks ago. We talked about what makes Celebrate Recovery safe. But there isn't that judgment and there isn't that turning away and going, ooh, gross, right? Because when we share something out loud in the context of a Celebrate Recovery group, we begin to loosen the chains of that thing.
Absolutely. And when you share your story, one of the when you share your story, one of the powerful things that comes is that when someone hears it, they may hear that maybe the first time they hear it, someone else is struggling with that same issue or has that same hurt that they're dealing with, and it breaks that power of feeling alone.
Yeah.
And And so that's another huge power that comes from sharing your story. Someone might go, oh gosh, I'm not alone in this.
Yeah, it's not
There's
just
other
me.
people who have this hurt or who have this struggle.
And you said you said a few minutes ago that when you share your testimony, there's that cool feeling of somebody coming up and saying, like, I so relate to that story.
Yeah.
Or I like it when somebody goes, that was my story. And
Yes.
then they begin to tell you their story.
Yes.
And it's nothing like your testimony. But
Yes.
there's something, but here's what's cool about that. God's healing is the same.
Yes.
And so
totally.
although the pathway there and some of the details in the past part of your life might be very different, the answer is the same. The healing is the same. The solution is the same. And so many people are going to relate to your story, even if you don't feel like they will. And I think that one danger is we'll hear a really powerful story of somebody whose life was super transformed, right? They went from, just one extreme to the other. And we start to think, well, my testimony isn't that big of a swing, so who wants to hear my testimony?
Yeah.
And I think that those testimonies are really important.
They are. I mean, I struggle with that because I didn't have drugs or alcohol, the classic recovery things that we think issues, right? And I remember thinking, who's going to relate to my story?
Right.
What, there's not much there. And I think that can be a common thing that people struggle with. Like, I don't have anything important to say, but you do. Every single person's story is important. Every single person has a story to share.
Well, and we always talk about the Celebrate recoveries for everybody, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
We talk about that it's for people who struggle with hurts, hang-ups, and habits. And the Bible says we've all sinned.
Yes.
So we fall short of the glory of God, which means we've all hurt other people and we've all been hurt by other people, which means we qualify for Celebrate Recovery.
Absolutely.
And so when we don't share our testimony, we're hurting people in some ways by not letting them know it's for you too, right? Like if we share our testimony and it isn't one of those classic stories or it isn't this big huge thing, but it's how God began to work in the small areas of my life, the little out of control areas of my life, and it kept me from doing something, or I was unhappy in this way and God changed it, then He worked through me and healed me. Then somebody else could be, maybe they're attending with someone and they're thinking, I am here for you because you're the problem and I'm just here for myself.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just here to just get you to group and I'm going to go home. And when they hear a testimony of somebody who came because they were here for somebody else, now all of a sudden they go, oh, it must be for me too.
Yeah.
And they can find healing through Celebrate
Absolutely.
Recovery. And so one thing that we just need to remind people all the time is only a third of the people who attend Celebrate Recovery come for drug and alcohol issue. People come for a wide variety of issue. I think when people hear Celebrate Recovery, they think drugs and alcohol.
They hear recovery.
Right.
Yes.
And it is true that recovery is for people who struggle with drugs and alcohol, but it's not just for those of us who struggle with drugs and alcohol. It's for people who spend too much money, people who look at inappropriate images online, people who judge other people who have a hard time in relationships, people who get angry, people who are control enthusiasts, and all of those different things, right? And so there's so many different people who've been abused and so many different things. And so sharing our story of how God has worked in us is a powerful thing. So here's something I would suggest you do. We're running close on time. Even if you're brand new in recovery, you've only been in recovery for a little while, I would encourage you to begin writing your testimony. Now, one great tool for this is going to be found in a step study when you go through your fourth step. And when you go through your fourth step, that's a moral inventory. You take stock of all the things you've done, good, bad, all things done to you, good and bad, and you write them on the best way to do it is an inventory worksheet, and it really helps you work through some of those issues and see some of the stuff that happened in the past and what it was really like. And so if you go through a step study, you're going to begin that process. But I would encourage you to begin, once you've done that, really writing through your testimony. Now, we see in Christ, how I got to Celebrate Recovery in Christ, and what my life is like now that I have.
Yeah.
And so there's so much power in that story, because so many times people will write that first third That'll be 90% of their testimony.
Yes.
What it was like before I came to Celebrate Recovery, what it was like. I call them drunkalogs, because a lot of times it's people who struggle with drugs and alcohol issues, and it's all oh my gosh, I was the worst, and here's this cool thing I did, and here's this another cool thing I did, and if it was so great, why'd you get sober? Like, why'd you start attending recovery? So I would encourage you to go in thirds that way. And even if you're not ready to share it in front of people, maybe they're like you and terrified, and the idea of standing in front of a group of people is like worse than death.
There is so much power in sharing it just even with a friend, not even an official,
Yeah, and
just sharing it one-on-one.
Right.
It does not have to be in front of a big group of people.
But there's still something so powerful about writing it out.
Yes.
Because you begin to see in black and white your story. You begin to see, this is what God has done for me.
Yeah.
And there's something so powerful about even just that process. Then once you've written it out, you can share it with another person, maybe one-on-one, or you can share it on stage, or however that's going to work.
Yeah.
But I would encourage you to do that, to write it out. Then I would also encourage you to write out a paragraph version. So after you've written the whole thing, boil it down and write a paragraph version. Then after you've done that, write a couple sentences so that you're ready to share it at any time. And so one of the cool things about being in recovery is that God will begin to bring people to you who will ask you questions about Celebrate Recovery. They may not say, hey, Johnny, would you tell me about that program called Celebrate Recovery? They may not be that specific, but they may ask questions like, hey, how come you're at this party and you're not drinking?
Yes.
Or usually you would have lost your cool during this thing and you didn't. Or hey, things seem to be better in your marriage. What's going on? Because ours is still hurting. Yeah. And it might even be even slicker than that. They may not even be that bold with some of those questions. And so having your testimony written out, both in the long version, a short version, and then a very short version, is really powerful for when somebody asks you. And there's another thing that I think is really important about having it written out. It's the same thing as what the Bible talks about the people in Israel, where they say, Moses said, write this down, keep it close to you, share it with your brothers and sisters, share it with your kids as you lay down, as you get up. Writing our testimony, it's not the same thing as God's word. That's not what I'm saying. But when we're having a bad day and we're going, man, is this recovery thing really worth it? Go back and read your testimony. Go back and read the miracles that God has done in your life. And go, oh yeah, I forgot he led me through the wilderness. Oh yeah, I forgot he split the Red Sea. Oh yeah, I forgot he led me into the promised land. Now, your story may not have those kinds of moments, but they will have big moments in your life.
Absolutely.
And will help you
Absolutely.
During those times where you feel like giving up. It's another reason we need to share our testimonies with other people as well. Yep. Even people who are in Celebrate Recovery, I get fired up when I hear your testimony.
God will use your story to help other people. 100%. Because how many of us have been impacted by someone else's story? It is so...
It's a powerful thing.
It's so powerful.
And I may be ready to give up on recovery.
Yeah.
And I might be thinking, is God really doing anything for me? Is this really changing me at all? And then I hear your testimony and I go, yeah, but I want that.
Yeah.
But I want that. I want that in my life.
Absolutely.
And so I'm going to keep on the course. I'm going to keep doing the right thing. I'm going to keep walking this way.
That was one of the things that grabbed me into recovery, was being at the summits and seeing the worship and hearing the testimonies and just seeing everybody there. There was something, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I was like, they have something, and I want that.
Yeah.
I want what they have, you know?
Yeah, it's such a powerful part of it.
2 years as, you know, just attending as Johnny's wife going, I want that. I want that.
Yeah.
I want that.
Yep. So anyway, that's what our encouragement for you tonight is to share your testimony, tell other people about what God is doing in your life, brag about what God is doing, boast about it. You're not boasting about yourself. You're not boasting about what you've done. You're boasting about what God has done. You're talking about what He has done in your life. Yes. That He is working through and helping you through some major issues in your life. Tell other people about it, because other people are struggling, other people are trapped, and other people need to know the hope that is available for them through Jesus. We are so excited to be with you on these Facebook Lives every night, and I hope that you'll join us at the Celebrate Recovery Summit. Again, go to crsummits.com for more information about that. And we've got really exciting things coming out at the summit that we want to talk about. We're not allowed to yet, and so please join us for the summit so you can hear those things, and then we'll talk about them a lot here
almost said
after that.
something
I know,
tonight.
I almost did too. I almost did too.
I was like,
and so,
oh, no.
Yeah, and it was just so funny because I was just like, there's a couple times where I almost said
I
something,
know,
and I
me
thought,
too.
it hasn't happened yet.
Me too.
So lots of exciting stuff coming at the summit, so we hope that you'll join us there. crsummits.com for that. And join us back here tomorrow night. Sheila is going to be with us, and so make sure you join us there. And I hope you have a safe and sane and sober 4th of July celebration, whatever that looks like, wherever you are. And so that's all we got. You got anything else?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Thanks, everybody. So we're going to say goodbye to Facebook.
Bye, guys.